Planes were in the air. An attack was imminent. 3 sites were going to be hit. Missile batteries and radar. And at the last minute, ring, ring. Hello? This is Donald Trump. An attack is imminent. I don't want a war, but we need to talk. Donald Trump contacts Iran at the last minute of the attack and calls it off. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And like I said, Donald Trump calls off the attack at the last minute. And not just calls off the attack at the last minute. Reporting shows that he contacted Iran to give them a heads up and kind of made the point that they need to talk. Iran told him that we will contact the Ayatollah. The decision is up to him. But by default, we're not having a conversation. You still have these sanctions on us. You've been ratcheting up pressure on us. We can't talk to you, but the decision boils down to the Ayatollah. This was the reporting that came out last night. I want to give somewhat of an overview of this. That's assuming my system is not freezing on me. It looks like it might be. But guys, if you enjoy the content, please consider supporting this content through PayPal or Patreon. They demonetize any video that I do on Iran, and it is a crapshoot if they will remonetize the video. And usually by the time they do, at that point, it has been spent in regards to the views that people give it. I want to give somewhat of an overview of this to people who weren't fully paying attention to this story. This story is somewhat fascinating, and what was breaking last night, it was around 5 a.m, where I got the opportunity to see this stuff, and I was too tired to do the video, and so I pushed it till this morning. But it is definitely something I want to talk about. So let's start at the beginning. What's the beginning? Everything that I'm going to say here is absolutely true. And it is almost a patriotic duty to kind of make this argument, because mainstream media is not going to make this argument, even though this is definitely the argument that needs to be made. Everything that I say here is absolutely true. We are the aggressors in this conflict. Back in the 1950s, the United States, working with the British government, overthrew the Iranian government. It overthrew that government because it didn't like the fact that that government was talking about using the oil revenue for the people of that country. Oil wasn't meant for Persians, it was meant for Americans and Brits, and that would remain so. We put in a brutal dictator, a Shah. That Shah had horrendous humanitarian rights, and yet we backed that brutal dictator, that Shah. That Shah was overthrown, and we've hated Iran ever since. When we put in a brutal dictator, that brutal dictator stays in office. Otherwise, we will go after you. My point in saying that is, if the Iranian people have somewhat of a bone to pick or an issue with the U.S., that is not necessarily this kind of thing out of magic. It's something based on things that we have done, policies that we've taken that have greatly adversely affect that population. Fast forward. The JCPOA. The Trump administration gets in office. Trump gets rid of the JCPOA. Trump ratchets up sanctions on Iran, so much so that they have difficulty getting things even like medicine. Trump tries to cut their oil revenue to like zero. Do you realize there are floods in Iran that are causing massive damage? We have no idea the loss of life that has taken place as a result of these sanctions. We do know 500,000 people lost their life, or 500,000 kids, I want to be specific, lost their life under Bill Clinton with those sanctions. We do know that under Trump, tens of thousands of people lost their lives in Venezuela. We have no idea how many people lost their lives in Iran due to those sanctions. Trump defined the Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. Trump defined anything that takes place from the standpoint of the Houthis, essentially Iran, because they consider them proxies of Iran. Trump increased the troop presence in that region of the world. None of this stuff was agreed upon by anybody else around the world. All of this was done unilaterally, with the exception of two quote-unquote allies. One, a totalitarian religious state that literally beheaded multiple people. I think it was over 30 people, and was trying to crucify some child. And in another case, an apartheid state that have shot and crippled thousands as they try to get back to their homes that they are being prevented from doing so. If these are our allies, what does that say about us? Lastly, the Japanese boat incident. 2 oil tankers were struck. Shinzo Abe was in Iran trying to bring down conflicts between the United States, or conflict between the United States and Iran, when an oil tanker is hit. Come to find out, that oil tanker is a Japanese oil tanker. What a coincidence. The Japanese Prime Minister is talking to the Ayatollah and Rouhani when a Japanese oil tanker is hit. Could be an accident, could be a bizarre coincidence, or maybe not. Maybe it's a message. The United States, without any investigation, Iran did it. Iran did it. And goes further and say, we have proof that Iran did it. As proof, they release this. This video is supposed to show Iran removing a mine from that boat, from that tanker. That's what we are supposed to believe. That's supposed to be evidence. That's supposed to be proof. Those guys are removing mines from that ship. Those guys in those yellow vests and everything else. Highly visible, removing mines. But look closer. Look very closely. Are they removing mines, or are they pulling people out the water? Which is, can you tell from this video? It looks like they might be pulling people out of the water, which is literally what Iran was doing, and everybody say they were doing. This makes me distrustful. The country that screamed weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that screamed Gulf of Tonkin, that screamed chemical weapon strikes in Syria, are now saying that Iran struck a fishing boat, a tanker, a Japanese tanker no less, when the Japanese Prime Minister was there for peace talks. This makes me distrustful. Not to mention filling your campaign or your cabinet with war criminals and habitual liars. So here we are. Let's start an analysis here. A few things took place. What we do know is that a drone was shot down. Fact. That is the first and only flat fact that we are going to have. Everything else goes into a certain degree of speculation. The United States claims that the drone was shot down in international waters. Donald Trump comes out. Oh, by the way, before I pass forward, the oil tanker captain disagrees with the story. The oil tanker captain makes the point that the Trump administration is lying about this. He says completely what they're saying happened didn't happen. It wasn't a mine. We were hit with a projectile. We were hit with a projectile. He's very clear about it. It wasn't a mine. The rest of the world, to some degree, distrusts the United States story on this because, after all, we're the country that screamed weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and our credibility is not the greatest, especially with a president that lies continuously. And not to mention war criminals and habitual liars in administration. So, let's go to this part. Donald Trump is now stuck with the scenario because this drone is shot down. The press wants to know. I'm sorry, guys. My computer is running extremely slow. Okay, apparently I can't pull that one up. Come on. All right, let's go to this one. So Trump has to respond. People are asking him, what are you going to do, Trump? Are you going to strike Iran? Are you going to strike Iran? Are you going to strike Iran? The press is screaming at him, are you going to strike Iran? Listen to Trump.
General Deptula, Jennifer, was giving us an idea of just how large these craft are.
We heard from the top.
Let's hear from the.
It was unarmed. It was not, there was no man in it, and there was no, it was just, it was over international waters, clearly over international waters, but we didn't have a man or woman in the drone. We had nobody in the drone.
Are you still open?
It would have made a big difference, let me tell you. Would have made a big, big difference. I have a feeling, I may be wrong, and I may be right, but I'm right a lot. I have a feeling that it was a mistake, but it was a very foolish move. That I can tell you.
Trump downplays it. Trump downplays it. Now, the United States says it was over international waters. It says it was an unprovoked attack. They blew it out of the sky. Now, the defenses on this drone, this was a spy drone. It was a spying platform. And it didn't necessarily have defenses. Its stealth was its defense. Not to mention it was supposed to be able to fly at ceilings of like 65,000 to 85,000 feet, which was supposed to be out of the range of most weapons platforms. Well, apparently not Iran's. Iran says this is BS. And not only is it BS, it was shot down over our territory. It was flying in our airspace. We gave them a warning and we shot it out of the sky. They go further. They said there was another plane that was flying along with that plane that they decided not to shoot out of the sky, saying they are warning, stay out of our airspace. Who's right? Is it possible that a spying plane or a spying drone would be flying over Iran? And if a spying drone was flying over Iran, would the U.S. military own up to the fact that there was a secret mission of spying on Iran? Meaning, what would the U.S. military say if they were flying a drone secretly over Iran to gain some level of intel, and that drone was shot out of the sky? Would they say, we were flying a drone over Iran and they shot us, fair shoot? Or would they scream, they shot us out of the sky and we were over international waters? I suspect the latter. They released a video, but I'd argue that the video is not really anything, considering the last video that they gave us telling us that this was some level of evidence that Iran was pulling a bomb off a boat when a ship captain says that that wasn't true. And I'm also stuck with this notion that this is the country that was screaming weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that was also screaming chemical weapon strike in Syria. And then the last case didn't even wait for evidence, or the last two cases didn't wait for evidence before pointing the finger. I'm stuck with not believing what my country is saying because my country has taken dubious and deceitful positions in order for provocation for war. I can't assume that that's true here. Meaning, I can't assume that what my country is saying is true here. I'm stuck with not knowing what's reality and having to make a choice on what I believe is more likely to be true. I think it is possible that a spying platform would be flying over Iran and it would be blown out of the sky. I think that's possible, totally. Is it likely that Iran shot a plane out of international waters? I don't necessarily think it's likely, but is it possible? I suppose so. This is what I'm stuck with. I'm going to go further. So the most recent information that has come out is from last night. Donald Trump apparently did approve of an airstrike. In fact, he approved of an airstrike on multiple targets. Now, in approving of airstrike on multiple targets, Jesus Christ, my system is crawling. In approving of an airstrike on multiple targets, Donald Trump said he essentially contacted them through Oman. And he made the point, the attacks are imminent. I want to talk. Now, they don't necessarily own up to that part that Donald Trump said he wanted to talk, but they do own up to the part that Donald Trump called them. I'm sorry. Here we are. Let me close some of these. Maybe that's what's causing it. So, Iranian officials told Reuters on Friday that Tehran had received a message from U.S. President Donald Trump through Oman overnight warning a U.S. attack on Iran was imminent. They spoke shortly after the New York Times reported that Trump had approved military strikes on Iran on Friday in retaliation for the downing of a U.S. surveillance drone, but called off the attacks at the last minute. In his message, Trump said he was against any war in Iran and wanted to talk to Tehran about various issues. He gave a short period of time to get the response, but Iran's immediate response was that it is up to the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, to decide about this issue, one of the officials told Reuters, speaking on condition of anonymity. A second Iranian official said, "We made it clear that the leader is against any talks, but the message will be conveyed to him about to make a decision. However, we told a Omani official that any attack against Iran would have regional and international consequences. We will not allow you to attack us without a response." Essentially, that's what they're saying. The New York Times quoted a senior administration official saying the U.S. warplanes took to the air and ships were put in position for a retaliatory attack, only for an order to come to stand down without any weapons being fired. Targets had included Iranian radar and missile batteries. The paper cited senior administration officials involved in or briefed in the deliberations as saying the strikes were set for early in the morning to minimize the risk to Iranian military or civilians, the Times added. Trump said the U.S. was cocked and loaded to strike Iran before he pulled back. Trump also made the point, "I'm in no hurry." President Trump said the United States was prepared to retaliate on Iran in 3 sites last night, but when he was advised of the potential for 150 people to be killed, he stopped the strike, saying would not be proportional to shooting down an unmanned U.S. drone. "I'm in no hurry," President Trump added his decision to cancel retaliatory strikes on Iran last night. Trump says that the sanctions are biting and more were added last night. Here's another interesting point. The U.S. government's decision making on responding to Iran is being done without a defense secretary. An acting defense secretary has been expected to depart that role today after he withdrew from consideration for the permanent role Tuesday. This is fascinating. This is entirely fascinating. Now, Bloody Gina Haspel, habitual liar Mike Pompeo, and war criminal John Bolton were all for this. Everybody around Trump was for this. Apparently, Trump was the one that pulled back. And the last two last points. How much of this is true, we have no idea. It is very possible that this was a paper attack, that Donald Trump, to some degree, made this up in order to kind of use this as an additional pressure campaign. Meaning, think of it as, I'm trying to inflict in their mind this potential of an attack, but an attack wasn't really planned. I don't believe this particular thing, though. With the maniacs that he have around him, it is very possible that they were going to do an attack. Not to mention very possible that they were going to do an attack. It seemed that Donald Trump did not want to do it. And regardless of who's around him, he's essentially the guy that's going to take the brunt, be it positives or negatives to this, and there are not going to be any positives. What I would say to Trump is this. Your presidency is yours up until the moment you give that order. The moment you give that order, the presidency is no longer yours. What I mean by that is, any retaliation by Iran is going to force a retaliation by the United States. A drone was shot down, and you have maniacs around him saying you got to strike Iran because this drone is shot down, including people who want to be screaming and dancing in Tehran when the government is toppled. The moment that you do those strikes, your administration is now in the hands of whatever Iran does, because you're going to be stuck with the consequences. Understand what I am saying. These are grave consequences. There's a gravity to this. If you attack Iran and they respond and American soldiers are killed, even if American soldiers are not killed, even if allies are killed, if they launch attacks against Israel, if they launch attacks against Saudi Arabia, if they launch attacks against Americans that are in that region, you will be forced to respond. Your presidency, as horrible as that presidency is, will no longer be yours. Mind my words. I've been right on this going all the way through. I said as soon as I started this channel that Trump was ramping up against Iran. And what do we have? And even though Trump might want a pressure campaign, and Donald Trump, hate this notion that these guys keep forcing him to get further involved in Syria, gets annoyed and wanted to pull troops out of Afghanistan and Syria, even though whether he did it or not is somewhat questionable, the intent seemed to be there. Meaning, I take him at his word, oddly enough, that he doesn't necessarily want a war. He wants brinksmanship with this notion of bringing them to the negotiation table. What I would tell him is that this story, this strategy is full of folly. No leader, no governmental structure would allow themselves to be blackmailed in this way, to be threatened in this way. We don't negotiate with terrorists, nor will they negotiate with us. We are threatening that country with this notion of getting favors from that threat. I'll punch you in the face if you don't do this. I'll squeeze you. I'll allow your people to die if you don't come back to the negotiation table with us. No government can do that. Understand what I'm saying. You are in a situation where you are going to lose just by momentum. The moderates in Iran agreed to that deal with Obama, the JCPOA. You must understand that the hardliners in Iran did not want that deal. And they have a governmental structure just like we have a governmental structure. And they have debates and everything else just like we have debates. Regardless of the Ayatollah being the top thing, they still have a governmental system. And the moderates won. They entered the deal. You pull out of that deal, making those moderates look like fools. And now you're going back to them saying, let's have another deal. It is impossible. It is utterly and entirely impossible. Now, if you want to have a deal with them, go back to the JCPOA and then talk. Nothing will take place before that. Mark my words, I am infinitely right here. This is something to do with politics and the internal politics of their country. We will not negotiate under those terms. They won't either. If you really want a deal, if you really want to talk, if you really want to bring down tensions, that is up to you. That is in your hands. The way you're going about it, it's not going to make it work. I'll leave it here. I'll leave it here. I think that's 22 minutes is a very long time, but I wanted to give a full rounded view of the story. So if you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Even if it's $1, I like to say $1 helps. Thanks all.